Hello and welcome everybody to the Photoshop Daily Creative Challenge. I am Sam Peterson, I'm your host. I want to say for this week and the next week, but we're on the second week already. It's flown by. We're on week 2 of 2, so we have 2 weeks live, 2 weeks of replays, just a heads up to everyone. It's possible you are watching this as a Creative Encore. If it says Creative Encore down at the title, that means we're doing replays. So we do 2 weeks every day, Monday through Friday, 30 minutes. We do 2 weeks of live, 2 weeks of replays. That gives you a month total to work on these challenges. And during that period, feel free to post them in the Discord at any time, share your designs. And if you are not familiar with how to join these challenges, let me show you that. Pop into here, the landing page, behance.net/challenge/Photoshop. And you can click the big blue button here at the top, take the challenge, and you'll see all the challenges here down below. Now, if we're doing, if this is a replay when you're watching it, you'll notice all of these are unlocked, but we actually have one yet to be unlocked. And today we are doing the Vintage Photo Challenge. So I'm going to show you how to, apply different techniques to make a modern photo look vintage, what, makes an old photo look like an old photo, all that good stuff. So definitely join here if you haven't yet. And I just want to say hey to everyone. I'm seeing the chat fly by. Ferry, Annika, Frank, Wade, Mercurial, Ted, a lot of people in the chat. Stony. Who did I miss? I know I'm missing some people. Gareth, Jennifer. Don't want to miss anyone. But good to see you all. Welcome on in. Glad to have you guys joining me again. I really appreciate you guys coming out every day to these challenges. It's been a lot of fun. Hope you guys have been enjoying them. Let's jump into the Discord real quick. Show you how to join that. So if you have not, you can click the Discord link. Wade's putting some of those links in chat. They're also down below in the description. But you can go here to the Discord and you'll see the challenge tab. So this is going to be the tab where you post any of the current challenges throughout all 4 of these weeks. You can post them. If you have a past challenge, there's tabs for that. If you are wanting to post something, get feedback for a design that's not related to these challenges, there's the Design Other section. There's the Ask a Question section. We have a lot of awesome people helping out in this community. We have mentors who are giving feedback and trying to help out. So we have Ted Valder doing a lot of the feedback and answering questions and stuff in the Discord. So if you want feedback or you have a question to ask or anything like that, we're here to help. Agelos, I'm never sure how to pronounce that. Sorry. This is looking great with the portal effect. I've really been enjoying seeing the portal effects. It's really cool to kind of see what like shapes and things people come up with. Like I like the spikiness of this one. That's really neat. We already got some of that vintage photo challenge going. And we got Frank with the portal effect. Nice, nice. I went a bit out of the box. No, I love it. I think the cool thing about these challenges is if you're experienced, you can go as far out of the box as you want. You can push yourself, push the challenge as much as you want to. And this is super cool. Love the effect on the astronaut here. Love the color shift and the portal effects. Super cool. But if you're new to Photoshop, you're still getting your bearings, or you just want to learn the technique in a very simple way, you can just follow along step by step with me if you want. So there's a lot of room for that, depending on what you want to do. So we got some of the clothing patterns here. A little animated process. That's awesome. Another one from Frank. Always cool to see what Frank's up to. Very cool. Some more portal effects here. I like this. Jumping out of the portal. Yeah, these are great. Really nice work, everyone. Like I said, I've been love seeing what everyone comes up with for the various challenges. Got some more feedback here. So very cool. I love this one. I saw this morning. It's really cool to see this kind of thing in these challenges. Like kind of a narrative based image here. So I thought this was really neat. Great execution too with the technique and the lighting and the, adding a narrative and a story into a design, I think is always a really great way to give it a pretty strong impact. Pillar C, this is super cool. I love the icy look of this. A little reflected ring on the bottom. Yeah, great effects. Super cool to just watch people take this and run with it. That one's by Katya. Got the little reflection kind of off the pavement as well. Yeah, excellent work, everyone. Really cool stuff. If we have a little time at the end, we may check some more of these out, but I've been loving kind of going through these. I love the playfulness of this and the colors. The drop shadow looks really great on that too. That one's by Richard Rodriguez. Excellent job, everybody. So let's jump into Photoshop, because that's what we're here for, right? We're going to go over some old, vintage techniques. So I just want to talk about a few things here. If anyone is unfamiliar with like kind of what separates a vintage photo from a modern one, well, I got a couple references here. So these are going to be some of the things I talk about. This is actually like the original on the left, and this is kind of I don't know if it's like restored or just kind of, you know, the levels are modified, give it more contrast and clarity and stuff like that. But it's good to have a reference on a lot of things if you're trying to recreate like a portal effect, or you're trying to recreate a vintage photo. It's always good to have a reference of what you're actually trying to achieve, just so you can really see like what makes it look that way, and you can kind of reference what you're doing to see if you're on the right track. So I like to have things like this, but we may refer to these in a little bit. So first and foremost, I think we all kind of know that a common thing with vintage photos is the sort of like sepia tone and the lack of color. So what I'm going to do is go up here to Layer, New Adjustment Layer, and we're going to do a Hue and Saturation Layer. I'm actually going to duplicate my base layer here, just so we have a backup. I don't think we'll need it, but I always like to do that. So I'm going to do Controller Command J, duplicate it, and I'll just hide the one at the bottom. That'll just be our backup. So we have the Hue and Saturation Layer. And what we're going to do for this is we're going to right click it and clip it to that image. And what I want to do is actually click Colorize. That's going to give us a bit more of a tint to play with, so we can kind of mess around with that sort of sepia tint. I'm going to try to get, like, the sepia tint's kind of a tan sort of color, maybe towards the red tones, but somewhere in this red, yellow kind of shift. Might want to do something like 35. I think that that level of saturation is actually pretty good. Maybe I'll tint it down a little bit, around 30. Looks not too bad. We can always adjust these later. These are adjustment layers, so we can tweak them at any time. It's all non-destructive. So from here, this is a big thing and something I kind of want to talk about that comes up a lot in photo compositing and editing is levels adjustment layer. So you can go to adjustment layer like we did before, levels adjustment layer, do levels. You can do curves if you prefer. I'm always kind of a bit of a levels man myself. I'm going to right click that and do create clipping mask like we did for the other one. Now from here, a big thing I think that separates vintage photos from modern ones is the contrast. We have really, really deep darks in here, and we don't have that so much on the other ones. So if I color pick some of the darker tones, you'll see it's right near black. You know, some of these deep shadows, I mean, that one's completely black. I don't think the hue and saturation is affecting that. Yeah, so completely black. If you go into these ones, and I'm not talking about the retouched ones where people increase the contrast. If you color pick the darkest area of here, look how dark that is. It's not nearly towards the blackest range. It's fairly dark, but it's really not, it's not even like down here, which is what, you know, I would have guessed it would be. And then if we take this one, if you color pick the retouched one, you'll see it goes very dark. But the originals a lot of times have this faded look, again, around the same area. So something to keep in mind. So what I want to do is go in here, and this bottom slider, you can basically ease off the shadows so the darkest darks are lessened. This kind of is affecting how dark those darks can go. And same thing with the lightest lights. It's basically making it so no brights can go above a certain point and no darks can go below a certain point. So I'm going to try to find a sweet spot with these. I really want to lessen the contrast by doing this. And if you guys ever hear me talk in the Discord when I'm giving feedback for designs and I say, like, you know, increase or lessen the contrast, this is one way to lessen it. And the top ones are a good way to increase it. But let's see, 70 and 210, maybe I'll do like something like that. You can just kind of eyeball it, and you can change this at any time because they're all adjustment layers. I do want to increase the contrast within the range we just defined. So we lessen the range a lot more, but I want to kind of pump up the contrast. Whoops, let's turn our hue and saturation on. That gives me a better feel for what I'm going for here. I don't want to go that much. 18. Whoops. I am adjusting the wrong thing. Let's go back to my levels. I was like, wait a minute, that slider doesn't look right. Maybe around 17 or so. And I'm going to increase it just a little bit. Yeah, that doesn't look too bad. And then maybe we want to darken it or brighten it a little bit in the midtones. So I'm just going to take this down a little bit. That looks pretty good. 17, 87, 246. Now this is going to completely depend on your photo. Your photo may be very bright, it may be very dark. The value range is going to be all over the place. The colors are going to be all over the place. So copying my settings won't really help, but hopefully you see what I'm doing. That kind of helps clarify the effect that we're going for. But with all these adjustments we do, it's really on a case-by-case basis. You need to identify what is going on with your photo and understand what adjustment layers or what effects you can use to tweak it to get it where you want to be. So understanding the why behind what you're doing is always very helpful, in addition to kind of learning the tools that you have available in Photoshop to do it. Hey, Annika. I don't think I said hey to you before. Umacorn, RB, Tim, what's up, everybody? Good to see y'all. So that looks pretty good. You can see that huge drastic change we have. That's very dramatic, and on its own, it, you know, if we take it from here to here, it ages the photo quite a bit. If you put that sort of desaturated sepia tone type of thing on it, and we can always increase the saturation if we want to push that more. It works pretty well. Now, one thing I really want to talk about with contrast, just as an aside, it's not specific to this one, but a lot of times when people are doing photo composites, there's a few key things that I notice that make them fit in with each other or not. When you're taking two images, putting them together, and trying to make it look realistic. And this is on the topic of contrast. That's why I want to touch on it really quick. One is perspective. We talked about that in a previous challenge. Another is lighting. And actually, I think on the first set of daily creative challenges, I talked about lighting a bit. So perspective and lighting are huge to making two images look like they belong together. But a third is contrast. So if you have one image that's very, very high contrast, very deep darks, very bright brights, and you put it with an image that has very washed out darks, they're not going to look like they fit together. Especially if the background has much deeper contrast than the foreground. It's typically the other way around. Because of atmospheric perspective, the further back in space you go, the less contrast things have. You'll notice that with like mountains way off in the background. The shadows in those mountains are very light compared to the foreground. So just keep that in mind. You never really want the background to have a deeper contrast than the foreground. And you want to make sure they look like they're in the same range, especially in the shadows. So just a little note, something that I notice sometimes when I see mistakes that could make images fit together a little bit better. So moving on, let's create a vignette layer. And I'm going to do that with a multiply layer. How do we add an old paper texture in ragged border? We'll get into that a little bit, Paula. I think the best way to do that is with photo textures. You can try to create them yourself, and we're kind of doing that with this vignette, but we're actually going to get to that in just a moment. So if you do Control or Command Shift N to create a new layer hotkey, I'm just going to do multiply. I like to name it multiply so I know, or you could just name it vignette. I think that's how you spell vignette. You go to the mode and you change that to multiply. Now I'm going to choose a color in the same color range of what we have, kind of this red or orange. I'm going to make it very desaturated. Press G for the fill bucket and click. So we're filling our, you can make a fill layer too, but that's how I like to do it. And then this is set to multiply, so we just get that darken effect. And I'm going to create a mask, this little rectangle here at the bottom. Click that, add layer mask. And now if we paint with black, we will conceal the effect, white to reveal. So painting with black just in the center with a very, very big round brush. You can see what I'm doing here. And I'm just kind of doing this. It's a very quick and rough vignette effect. You can always adjust it if you want. You can always mask it back in with white. But I kind of like what we have. Just very general. And now we can always modify this again. I'll clip this to my mask. We don't really need to be clipping these because the photo takes up the whole canvas, but I like to keep it organized. So that's our vignette layer, and that looks pretty good. So onto the photo texture. For photo texture, I actually have a couple here. I'll post those in the chat real quick because I actually don't believe these, whoops. I don't believe that these are in the starter layer, or starter file. Words are tough. So those are the links. Sorry, some of them are very long. But if anyone's watching the replay, hopefully you can see them up here. 2732566667 is one, and the other is 36030225. So hopefully that helps. So let's do this one first. I just do Controller Command A and then Controller Command C to copy it, essentially, and then I just like to paste it. So from here, I'm going to size it up so it fits our canvas. And then I'm going to hold down hold down Shift, rather, to be able to just kind of warp it without the proportions constrained. Hit Enter when I like it there. And, excuse me, for this one, we can try out different blending modes up here. If you just cycle through them. I like to click it, and then I use the arrow keys to cycle through them. It helps me like see how they look pretty quickly. Color dodge looks, it blows it out a little bit too much. I kind of like this effect that we get with lighter color because it makes it look like there's a glare on the photo. So it's not really like an old photo effect, but it looks like we're actually, looking at a photograph. So if you're ever doing anything where you want a little glare like that, it kind of makes it look like, it's a picture of an actual photo, which could be useful in some circumstances. But for us, let's do overlay. I like that. It looks good. It's just way, way too dark. So I'm going to lower the opacity because we really don't want this. Like that kind of looks like stucco, that effect. And I'm not interested in that effect. I want to fade that out, but I still want some of that texture, and I like some of that vignette we get from it. So maybe something like 20%, maybe a little bit more. 25%, 26%, that looks pretty good for me. Now I'm going to go and do the same thing. I'm going to grab the other image. Controller Command A, Controller Command C, and then V to paste. Controller Command V. So from here, you notice that this one looks a little odd. It kind of looks like a negative. So first and foremost, I'm going to resize this just to fit. Hold on Shift just to be able to move it. And if we try this, because it's kind of this negative effect, you notice it, like when it does this, it looks pretty weird. It's kind of the opposite of what we want. So I'm going to change this back to normal. I'm going to go to Image, Adjustment, and Invert, so we don't have this negative. That turns it, there we go. So if I do multiply, that looks much more like what I'm going for. Again, this is just too harsh. So what I'm going to do is I am going to, I'm going to make this a smart object. Oops, not layer styles. Right click it, create smart object. So anything we do will be non-destructive at this point. I want to blur it a little bit. I don't like how harsh this is. It's just very, very sharp. It's a little bit too harsh. So I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And I think this is actually the setting I use, 2.3. I just want to soften it a bit, but you can kind of see how it affects it as you adjust it. So something around 2 looks pretty good. Softens it up. You can see that difference right there. Really helps. Looks more natural to me. Also, the opacity is way too high. I'm going to lower this down a lot. I just want a little bit like of a dust and scratch effect, Something where you can kind of see it, but it's not too intense. Even 20 is a bit much, 22. Maybe something like, maybe something around 18. I think that looks pretty good to me. Hey, Chad, what's going on? Good to see you. So let's see. We got that. Set the opacity down. That looks pretty good. One thing, along with the contrast, that I think looks a little bit unrealistic is the sharpness of this. Now, vintage photos, they're not blurry necessarily, but this looks like it was taken with an HD camera. You know what I mean? Like a modern camera. So I actually want to take our base image here. It's actually, we still have the backup, but I can right click this and do convert to smart object. And I want to blur this. Now, not a lot, just enough so it doesn't look like it was taken with a modern HD camera. So I'm going to go to Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur once again. And you can see that actually kind of helps right there. Along with all the other effects that we have, that makes it look a bit older. Now you can adjust it, you know, like the edges are still fairly sharp. It's just not so crisp. So I'm going to try maybe a little bit less than this. Yeah, maybe something like that. And you can kind of switch it on and off and you can see what it does to the horse's hair. See how it just makes it look a little bit more believable that this is kind of an older camera. Maybe I'll just do like an even 2. And I can always adjust that. It's a smart filter. So if you don't like it, you can always right click, or sorry, double click on that smart filter. Oops, what am I doing here? Let me save this first. Sorry, double click on the Gaussian blur specifically, and then you can adjust this. So if you want to make the filter a little bit less, like 1.9, you can just do that. So you can change it at any point, which is really, really helpful. Sam's photo textures. Hey, Wade, thank you so much for doing that. I appreciate that. Let's see here. So I think that filter helped a lot. And all of these effects kind of stack on top of each other to help. So the hue and saturation was huge. You know, that's a big impact. I think this Gaussian blur really helps set it in place a little bit more. The textures we got. And I have that original vignette on. I kind of like how that looks, but along with the texture that has a natural vignette there, I think it's a bit much. So I'm going to ease it off a little bit. Our vignette layer, I'm just going to take down. Yeah, that looks good. 65%, sure, why not? The only thing from here, and I can check my references, and I think this looks pretty good. The only thing from here is I think some of these textures, because they're set to multiply, they're gonna darken down the image a bit. So what I'm gonna do to offset that is actually just create a new adjustment layer, levels, and this is gonna be kind of like a final levels adjustment. I typically finish all my images with the levels adjustment. It's just a good way to kind of tweak the contrast and the brightness exactly where I want. A lot of times certain effects may modify that slightly, so it's good to just adjust it slightly. But maybe like, let's see. Bump the brightness up. I'm gonna leave the dark. I don't want to increase the contrast anymore because we did something to get rid of that. But maybe I'll tweak that a little bit, those midtones. Yeah, I don't want to go too bright. 228. Just tweak that on and off. That looks pretty good. And I'm not sure if this hue and saturation is a little too red, so I'm going to try that as a final tweak. I want it more like yellow. Yeah, that's just a very minor tweak. And this is kind of the thing, when you get to this ending stage with a lot of these, you can really just tweak it as much or as little as you want until you kind of have the perfect effect. And I think that's everything. I think I'm pretty happy with this. I could create another like blurred image if I wanted to kind of blur the edges. Sometimes in these vintage photos, I notice they have very simplistic backgrounds. The thing about this photo is it already has it. There's dust in this photo, the background's out of focus. But sometimes you could create like a different layer and kind of blur the stuff that's not in focus here and simplify it a bit. I feel like a lot of these images kind of have, I mean, a lot of these are taken behind an image, but a lot of times the background gets kind of washed out. So really just depending on the effects that you want. Take this final thing. increase that brightness just a touch. And I think we're done. So that is it. That is the vintage photo challenge. If you ever want to take like a photo of yourself and your friends, maybe you're dressed up in like Halloween costumes or dressed up like cowboys for some reason, and you want to give it like a convincing vintage effect, or maybe you have a photo of some classic cars and it would be fun to kind of tweak it and make it, see if you can make it look convincingly old and vintage. These are just some effects. I think the key takeaway is when you're trying to replicate effects and things, look at what makes those effects look the way they do. Get references, analyze them, try to understand why does it look like that. Oh, it's less contrast. Oh, it's desaturated. It's got this sepia tint, things like that. And try to analyze what makes it look the way it does and use that whenever you're creating anything you're creating, whether that's a portal effect or a vintage photo effect or whatever it is. Reference can really always help you understand the why behind it. So thanks for joining, everyone. I am out of time. I got to run. Join the Discord. We'll give you feedback. I look forward to seeing all the designs you guys are doing. And tomorrow is our last day. So I'll see you guys then. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a great one.